Hari Om, beautiful people. Today I want to talk a little bit about breathwork and my personal work on breathwork. So I want to give you a little history. It might be educational for some of you as well. In the beginning, I come from nearly 30 years teaching yoga. So of course, the yogic pranayama, the breathing exercises of yoga, is like the origin that inspired so many people, so many modalities. Yogic Pranayama comes from two Sanskrit roots, Prana and Ayama. Prana is the vital life force, that force of life that sustains life and energy, right? It's life itself. And Ayama can be translated as control. It can also be translated as expansion. But Ayama is also the Lord of death, the deity that represents death. So when we inhale, we're alive. When we exhale and there's no breath, we cease to exist. And the goal of the yogic pranayama is to expand this prana, this pranic field in the energetic body, in the pranamaya kosha as well, interfering with the physical body. So the yogis in deep state of meditation, they have this spontaneous apnea. They spontaneously stop breathing and become one with the whole, with totality. So you become death, still alive. That's the goal, the ultimate goal of pranayama, yogic breathing exercise. And of course, within these breathing exercises of yoga, there's also different breathing practices. Some practices to mitigate thirst or hunger, to control, balance the right and left brain, a sympathetic and parasympathetic system, or energize the body or help relax. So anyways, but the ultimate goal is to help the yogi to achieve the awakening of Kundalini and this totality, this union with all there is, samadhi. That's the yogic pranayama. And that's also a base where I started my practice. Years later, I started exploring all the types of breath work, like tantric breath work, for instance, is still connected very much with the yoga and for helping spread this pranic field and achieve altered or expanded states of consciousness. But these days, when people talk about breath work, it can be anything. So it's important to understand the differences and with who you want to practice and for what. When I studied breath work, which is connected to therapy, I want to explain that there was two therapists and psychiatrists and scientists who started exploring with breath for therapy. First, in the past, we have a psychoanalyst called Wim Hayek, and he, inspired by yogic pranayama, decided to use these breathing techniques to explore the connection between emotional and physical body. But years later, around the 60s and 70s, Stan Grof and Leonard Orr was the first therapists that created a modality around breath work for exploration of expanded states of consciousness and with therapeutic purposes and reasons. So Stan Grof and Christine Grof, they created what is called holotropic breath work. Stan Grof was a scientist as well, and he was exploring with expanded states of consciousness and the phenomenologies of the psyche with LSD. When the LSD became illegal with this war on drugs started in the 60s, he had to let go of those researches, but exploring how in those expanded or altered state of consciousness would naturally breathe, they realized and thought, what if I take just the breathing with specific music and what he called body work together with transpersonal psychology, which was emerging at the time, and use that modality for this exploration of consciousness and therapy. And that was how holotropic breathwork came to exist. More or less on the same time, the 70s, Leonard Orr, he also created a modality of breathwork exploring therapeutic purposes. and he named it rebirthing. His technique was named rebirthing. He realized that some people would, when they would do the specific breathing, they would go back to their birth scene or the womb life. Sometimes he did his breath work using a snorkel or under the water or not. But this is the work of Leonard Orr. So those two peoples were the first therapists pioneering, inspired perhaps in the yogic pranayama and others, that codified or created this modality to explore expansion of consciousness and therapy. After that, many other modalities came to exist. So we can take the example of Hatha Yoga. First there was Hatha Yoga. There's many types of yoga, but the one yoga that used asana, physical postures, breathing exercise, meditation, and kriya, or the activity of purification, was called Hatha Yoga. From Hatha Yoga to these modern days, we have Vinyasa Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Gota Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Kalyani Yoga, you name it. So from holotropic breathwork and rebirthing, many other types of breathwork came to exist. An authentic holotropic breathwork, it's very complex in a way that usually is not one session of 2 hours, 3 hours. Holotropic breathwork, when it's done authentically, because a lot of people say they practice holotropic breathwork or they offer holotropic breathwork, but it's not really. They just use the word, the name, to try to explain something. But an authentic holotropic breathwork is usually done during a weekend. So let's say you have a group of 10 participants. On Saturday, or whatever day, 5 people will sit, 5 people will breathe. We call that breather and sitter. We have an introduction, a class, of explaining all the paradigm, the holotropic paradigm, things that could happen, what to expect. And then the practice itself is around 3 hours of a music, specific type of music. And after those 3 hours, there's not a real closure. After the 3 hours and the music stop, if a breather don't feel ready to leave the room, they will stay in the room and a facilitator will stay with them. So we have, let's say, 5 breathers, 5 sitters, and 1 facilitator for each 10 people or 5 pairs of breather and sitter. If the facilitator needs to stay there with the breather for hours, it will stay. For those who are ready to leave the room, the sitter will guide them into what we call a mandala room. It's a form of art therapy where a person can then start the process of integration. And then later on, we have a circle of share. That's an authentic breathwork called holotropic breathwork. That's not what I do. I was trained in holotropic breathwork, but I took elements of holotropic breathwork with the elements of shamanic breathwork. So shamanic breathwork was created by Star Wolf. She also studied with Stan Grof, holotropic breathwork, and she then created her own style, which she called shamanic breathwork because she was much into shamanic practices. And this technique uses shamanic instruments like the shamanic drums, shakers. The music is more like sounds of nature or sound of animals. You might have or might not have a guided visualization in the beginning of the breathwork that will guide you to travel the worlds, the underworld, the upper world, the middle world. And so what I like to offer in my techniques and my offerings, it's a hybrid between holotropic breathwork and shamanic breathwork. I call it holotropic inspired breathwork. It will depend on who it's coming to receive. Holotropic breathwork is very all-inclusive because it comes hand in hand with transpersonal psychology. So we're encouraged or taught not to use sage burning or shamanic instruments because it wants to open space for every person, any person with any religious or philosophical backgrounds. Now, I also tried to study rebirthing technique, and that was not my favorite personal modality. And I can talk more about that in another training. There's no rights, no wrongs, just, we resonate with different modalities. And for me, holotropic breathwork is the father of breath work that is used for those holding space for deep transformational work. So we need to be very aware when we want to practice with someone, with a practitioner, facilitator. In holotropic breathwork, we have a minimum of 2.5-year training. And what you learn in this 2.5-year training is not how to help you how to breathe and go into expanded states, but is how to hold space when people are going through those expanded transcendental states of consciousness. In a yogic pranayama, it's a very, very powerful practice. But unless you are with a very authentic teacher in India that knows exactly what they're doing, or not just in India, but they have that tradition, they understand very much so the things that can happen deeply. And traditional yoga teacher will not hold that space if through a very intensive process of Kundalini awakening, you have difficulties in your life. You're not being able to cope with normal life, with society, or you're having what Stan Grof would call spiritual emergency, or even a psychotic breakdown. Then perhaps, hopefully, your yoga teacher will guide you into a therapist. Now, a holotropic breathwork facilitator and even a shamanic facilitator is trained to help you, guide you through those deep transformational processes. Perhaps the language we use, it's a little bit different. For instance, in transpersonal psychology, we might say things like dissociation or psychosomatic issues or problems. In shamanism, you might call it soul loss or soul retrieval for dissociation, or psychosomatic would be considered illness of the soul, when something in your psyche is affecting your physical body. So different wordings, but they should be able to hold that space for your deep transformational psychological processes. Okay, so those are some of the differences, similarities, and the modalities that I practice and study myself. So yogic pranayama, some tantric breathing exercise. I also have been with Wim Hof and practiced a little bit of his modality. It's great, but it lacks a little bit of this psychological process, of a therapeutic process, how to really help individuals when they're going through deep processes. So yeah, I hope this can clarify some things. And if you have any question or things to add on, let me know, and I'll send you all much love.